Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. Hi.
Come on. Good evening.
Good evening.
I see some of y'all, your mouth is full with snacks, everything. I'll give you a chance to finish chewing and all that good stuff. But we'll get started tonight. It is a pleasure to be here. But before we begin, I want to start by acknowledging that the University of Michigan is located on the territory of the Anishinaabe people. The Ann Arbor campus currently resides on land ceded through the Treaty of Detroit in 1807. Additionally, in 1817, the Ojibwe, the Odawa, and the Badawame nations made the largest single land transfer to the University of Michigan, ceded through the Treaty of Fort Meigs with the hope that their children could be educated. We acknowledge the sovereignty of tribal lands and the painful history of genocide, forced assimilation, and displacement of Native communities that facilitated the establishment of the university. We affirm contemporary and ancestral Anishinaabe ties to this land. The profound contributions of Native Americans to this institution and the university's commitment to educate the children of Native ancestors. I greet you in the tradition of call and response through a single yet powerful Kemet word that means to be at peace. Please repeat after me. Hotep, 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 Hotep. Hello and welcome to the 9th annual King's Talk. My name is Charles Phillips, a fourth-year PhD candidate in educational studies, and I will be your MC for this evening. I'd like to thank you for joining us here in person and virtually at home. We are here to honor my Alpha Phi Alpha brother and my Morehouse College brother, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I gave my own King Talk speech way back in 2023. Being a King's Talk speaker was such a memorable experience and incredible opportunity for me. It enabled me to share connections that I made with my experiences in teaching mathematics, researching and teaching mathematics, and the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The King Talks gave me a platform here at the University of Michigan and on the world stage to share my passions and their significance to the progress of humanity. The King Talks began in 2017 as a way to provide the University of Michigan graduate students with a platform to share their unique perspectives of the world. This year's theme, Unbowed and Unbroken, the enduring struggle for justice. Tonight, we will hear 7 speakers tell a story about their life, about their research, and what it is and why they hold it dearly to their hearts and how it reflects the theme of this year's symposium. So some quick logistics. Men's bathroom are down this hall and take a right. Women's bathroom are down this hall, and you'll see those as well. And for those that need additional space or any other needs, there are gender-neutral bathrooms on the 3rd floor. And for those that have joined us in person, if you need to move across the room for any reason, please use the rear doors, walk down the hall, and then come back through the other door, just so we don't disrupt our speakers nor walk in front of the camera. Thank you. Are we ready to begin? This side of the room, come on. Are we ready to begin?
Yes.
Onions, tomatoes, let us begin. I heard a groan, I like that. I heard someone groan. All right. Our first speaker for the evening is Amina Tabassum. She'll be presenting her talk titled Midwives, the Forgotten First Responders. Amina is a master's student in international economic development from Metro Detroit, Michigan. A fun fact about her is that she loves archery. That's right, Hawkeye and Green Arrow better watch out. Please join me in welcoming Amina.
Imagine this. In rural Yemen, a woman cries out in distress. Her village is flooded and she's in labor. The nearest healthcare facility is hours away, and Yemen is in a civil war. There's no guarantee she'll get the treatment that she needs. As the minutes pass, her odds are dwindling. In fact, in Yemen, every 2 hours, a woman dies in childbirth. So who do you think reaches her first? Sorry, I forgot the clicker. So who do you think reaches her first? EMTs? Aid workers? Local police? The answer is none of the above. It's a young woman, barely 22, with a backpack. So question 2, at 22, what was in your backpack? School supplies, food, pamphlets from changing your major 50 times. In her backpack, there are some pretty interesting things. Definitely would not pass a TSA security check, but interesting stuff nonetheless. There are sterile gloves, there are metal instruments, umbilical clamps, there is all sorts of things that she needs to facilitate an emergency birth outside of a hospital setting. This is a midwife, and she is a first responder. I didn't know this until a couple months ago when I started my internship at Direct Relief, which is a medical aid organization located in sunny Santa Barbara, just minutes away from the Pacific Ocean. And I mainly put this photo up here to remind everyone that the sun does exist. It's just not here at the moment. We don't all live in an eternal Michigan winter. On my very first day, my supervisor took me on a tour of their massive distribution center, and we went past all the different types of aid that they send out. So there were hurricane packs, there were emergency backpacks, like diabetes medications, cancer medications, and then finally, we stopped in front of this glass case. And she very casually said, "This is our midwife kit. It contains enough supplies to facilitate 50 live births in almost any environment." And then she moved on. Sorry. But me, I was still frozen to the spot. Because in that moment, I realized I had forgotten something pretty fundamental. I had forgotten that women give birth. My mother is probably watching this, like, you ungrateful. Like 18 hours of labor wasted on you. But what I mean by that is that I forgot that women continue to give birth regardless of the circumstances of the world around them. They give birth in war. They give birth in floods, in earthquakes, when hospitals collapse, and when borders close. And midwives, they're sometimes the first or perhaps the only responder that can reach them. Which is why our current reality, where midwives are underfunded, understaffed, and under-equipped, is extremely detrimental. Because when that happens, women die from things we know how to treat. They die from preventable causes, which is completely unacceptable in 2026. And midwives are an incredible, incredible resource because when they're well-equipped, they can provide up to 90% of essential maternal and newborn health care services. On top of that, research shows that for every dollar invested in midwives, there's a $16 return on investment. The World Health Organization says that fully investing in midwives by 2035 can avert roughly 2/3 of maternal newborn deaths and stillbirths, saving 4.3 million lives per year. This makes them one of the most cost-effective solutions in global health. So that brings me to question 3. If this work has such incredible returns, why is there so much underinvestment in their workforce? To answer that question, let's go back to Santa Barbara, in front of the midwife kit. See, the thing about the midwife kit is it's not exactly cutting-edge Iron Man technology. It's actually a pretty simple idea. It's a container that contains everything that midwives need to do their job in different environments. But in order for it to exist, someone had to recognize the suffering that women go through in war. Someone had to recognize the important work that midwives do to ease that suffering, which is why the first step to investment is visibility. We cannot help, serve, or innovate for populations who we refuse to see. And that's why we need to think about how can we increase visibility for midwives. And this isn't just a question for somebody who works in healthcare or humanitarian response. Every single field has a role to play. If you're in policy, visibility means inclusion in frameworks. If you're a business or finance, visibility is capital allocation. Engineering, it's what or who you build for. And data or research, it's what you measure. Every field shapes what the world takes seriously, and we have to take them seriously. Now look, I know this is a pretty depressing topic. I don't know who decided that I should speak first, but here we are. But honestly, I think the story of midwives is a story of hope. Because you see, in war and in disasters, all the odds are stacked up against midwives and the women that they serve. And yet they show up every single day pushing for new life to be born, life that prevails over the death and destruction around them. And with everything going on in the world, that's exactly the type of grit and perseverance that we need. So we have to support them. So small action item for you. If you scan this QR code, it will take you to a petition drafted by the International Confederation of Midwives, and basically calling on governments and healthcare officials to support and fund midwives. Because sometimes justice and hope don't always come in uniforms or sirens or helicopters. Sometimes it's just a girl with a backpack. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Amina. Thank you for bringing awareness. Our next speaker is Anjali Arora, presenting her talk titled Rooted in Calm, Rising in Courage, Meditation as the Inner Revolution. She is a master's student in data science from UP, India. An interesting fact about Anjali is she is a former long jump athlete and was chosen as best cadet under the National Service Scheme 2 times in a row. Right on, okay. Please join me in welcoming Anjali.
Hi, everyone. So many good faces, huh? Okay, so let me start a question. How many of you washed and look at the mirror today? Raise your hands. This side? No? You can raise your hands. Come on, man. Yeah. Nice. Confident, huh? Let's talk again after the midterms. Now, I want to ask you one again question. How many of you would look again into the mirror and ask yourself, who are you? What's your purpose? What are you doing? Low hands? No hands? That is, yeah, 1. Nice. 2, 3, 4, 5. Not so many, right? That is a mirror which will hit you harder. Because that is the mirror which will tell your authenticity. Who are you exactly? What are you doing? Who are you becoming? Who you are exactly? Right? So let me share a reflection from a 12 years old me. Something I have never shared it out loud. But before I start, a disclaimer. 12 years old me doesn't come with the content warnings or captions or filters. So you are at your own risk. It was an afternoon. My daily routine to visit the place of worship nearby. I entered, I bowed, and I was about to leave when I heard somebody sneaking into the room I was in. I kept praying until something uncomfortable happened. It was a man, big man. He was a man I trusted, the father of my friend, the man managing the holy place. But in that one moment, he crossed the line. That physical abuse shattered me. It froze me. I was too small to even fight, too scared to even scream. So I did the only thing I could. Ran. I ran. But in that moment, something fundamental shattered. Something in me shattered. Because it revealed the world outside. You know, at an age when emotions are forming, my trust expired early. Since then, humanity feels like a risky investment. Turns out, even holy places need healing. Yes, it took me 30 years to say this. Healing. After that, fear leaked into everything. Friendship, relationships, even walking half a mile felt like crossing battlefields. I was ashamed of it. I shouldn't be, right? I shouldn't have felt like this. But I did. You know, sometimes injustice doesn't happen what others do to you. It happens what you do to yourself. And when you don't know yourself deeply, you tend to look from the other's perspective. You tend to look from the borrowed lenses. Then what happens? You just lose identity. You lose direction. You lose yourself. Right? You know, it really took me harder to say this. But every comment, every opinion feels heavier than it deserves. I wanted to scream. I wanted to say out loud, why? Why me? To the left of the room, how would you coped up? How would you would have coped up with this situation? And you, how? Crying? Shouting? Escape room? I did the only thing I'm good at. Zipped up my mouth and stopped praying. But trust me, I was not doing fine. I was not doing okay. I was surviving from my own noise. Anger followed. Rebellion, aggression. To an adult, it's like, and teenage attitude. But for my parents, it was something that scared them. So they said, listen, I think you would need this. You should give it a try. Sit, concentrate, and experience. I was like, what? With no subscription plan? Not even a free trial? It is that it is, And that's how meditation entered into my life. With no explanation, no theories, as survival. And since then, meditation became my lifeline. Sitting in silence became the safest time for me. It was turning inward, knowing the inner me, the real me, the authentic me. Meditation gave me the courage to hold the spaces where I was once made to shrink. Meditation gave me the learning that leadership isn't about the loudness, it's about the alignment. Peace isn't passive, it's powerful. And you have to align yourself to the direction of your soul. The results were quite surprising. The girl who really was not able to even walk a mile crossed oceans. The girl had a pause, led conversations on the global platform. See? Meditation became my daily defibrillator, bringing me clarity day by day. So, to all those who have ever felt like this before at any point of time, listen, you would need this. Sit, concentrate, and experience. Give it a try. With no subscription plan, free trial, free. Because meditation will calm you down. It will nourish your core. It will make you bloom. Let this inner revolution begins today. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Anjali. Our next speaker is Kende Sowuni. She is presenting her talk entitled, please work with me, this is in German, okay? Dürfen schwarz Blumen malen. Yeah. Y'all sound American, so y'all would agree with the way I spoke that. I'm gonna double check with her. Kende is a PhD student in Germanic languages and literatures from Lagos, Nigeria. An interesting fact about her is she's a twin. And her full name is MLK Bebon. Please join me in welcoming Kende.
Picture this. Berlin, 1986. In a dimly lit cafe. About 8 Black women sit together, head bows over papers, coffee cup in hands, exchanging stories, ideas, experiences, and laughter. Now you see, these women aren't just friends hanging out. They are quotidian intellectuals, scholars, and writers attempting to carve a space for themselves in a country that is yet to acknowledge them. They are the face of the newly formed Adefrau, Afro-Deutschen Frauen, a new word for an old presence. And yes to that question you have in your mind. They are German. Now, I know many of you did not expect to find Black women in the story of German cultural life, but they exist. And they are not mere footnotes of German history. They are the visible presence of Germany's unacknowledged historical past. And these women used writing and storytelling to make visible the hidden realities of the Afro-German experience. Now, let me ask you a question. Have you ever said where you're from and have someone look at you like that answer didn't quite make sense? Maybe your name, your accent, your face, or your skin didn't quite fit the picture they had in their head. Well, this was and still is the lived experience of the Afro-Germans. And this very mindset, this monolithic mindset, is the one those women in that cafe and others after them sought to dismantle. The mindset about who is or should be German. Now, one of those women in that cafe was Mai Ayim. Mai Ayim was a scholar, activist, and poet who used poetry to critique the linguistic and cultural borders of German belonging. In one of her poems, Aus dem Rahmen, she writes, Ich male dir ein dunkles Gedicht vor dein weißes Gesicht. I paint you a dark poem for your white face. Now you say, Ayim uses ich in this poem as a confrontation and declaration of presence. She says, Ich bin's. It is I. I am here, and I belong. Now, this I is not ascribed to one individual. It is collective. It includes everyone who has ever had their Germanness questioned. She uses another word, first. Now, this word she used as a representation of a new ground where the Afro-German and Black German identity is not an anomaly, but a foundation. German is a language where the word schwarz is linked to many forms of illegalities. Okay. Schwarzarbeit, Schwarzmarkt, Schwarzfahren. Ayim, however, reclaims this word as power, presence, and pride. For those of you who are unfamiliar with German language, one of the biggest linguistic mistakes you can make is not capitalizing your nouns. And trust me, the students in my class, in my language class, can attest to this. Ayim, however, does the most radical thing with this word. She writes schwarz in all caps. Now, this is not a typo. It is intentional. It is a proclamation and a refusal to let the normative system define the grammatic, aesthetic, and cultural borders that she has been given and handed. Ayim Schwarz steps out of the frame to be acknowledged and invites us all to do the same. But once we've stepped out of this frame, what comes next? Well, that is the very question Sharon Dotua Otu poses in her essay, Dürfen Schwarzen Blumen malen? Are Black people allowed to paint flowers? Now, this question appears as a simple rhetorical question. It is, however, a deeply political one. Otu asks, must Black artists always create through pain? Why is Black creativity only validated when it centers, educates, or explains trauma? Why are we expected to diversify the canon and never for once define it? Like Ayim, she begins with grammar. She insists on capitalizing the word schwarz as a form of solidarity. Because as we have come to understand, language or form is never neutral. Otu, however, offers a solution, a purpose scribing, a form of writing that comes from joy, from contradiction, a writing that doesn't justify itself. Because you see, for Otu, painting flowers is not a retreat from protest. It is epistemology. It is the refusal to let the normative system define the scope of our imagination. And these flowers are not ornamental. They are Afrofuturists, tools for dreaming, for imagination, for resisting, and endless imagination, and possibilities. As a Nigerian and African scholar in German studies, a field largely and mostly shaped by Eurocentric traditions, I often carry the weight of conditional belonging, the pressure to prove that my work is valid, my work is serious, that I belong here. But like Otto, here is how I've chosen to paint my flowers. In one of my classes last semester, I wrote a surprising paper on a German kids TV show called Ben das Brot. Funny character, I know. Thanks again, Andreas. You see, this character is the US Sesame Street in Germany. And I wrote on how the likability of this character is a mirror of the mad modern subject. But I was able to write this paper not just because it was fun, which it was, or because I wanted to and I did, but because I could. Because I have come to understand that joy and absurdity are also valid sides of knowledge. And the freedom to choose creativity over certain expectation is one of my flowers. But I know this freedom isn't available to everyone. But the paths that I walk in this field was forged by Afro-German women like my IM, Sharon Dodua Otu, and here in the US, Martin Luther King Jr., and their refusal to be erased. In this refusal, their words made room for mine. So I reject the idea that I'm here just to diversify the field. No, I'm here to define it too. Like I am, I've come to understand that breaking form is a method. And like O2, I have learned that creative freedom is a grammar of survival. So, you see, my flowers do not bloom in opposition to protest. No. It blooms alongside it. In my choice to center Black interiority, to write from a place of rest and not just reaction, to treat softness not as silence, but as a strategy. So I leave you with this. What forms of thoughts have you inherited? And what might it mean for you to step outside of it? And most importantly, what is your flower? And what flowers would you paint or might you paint if no one is watching? Because maybe now is the time to pick up your brush like I did and paint. Thank you.
Dankeschön, Kiende. Wunderbar. Right? I'll just throw some words out here and there where I can, okay? Our next speaker is Cole J. Dorman, presenting his talk entitled, Science Shouldn't Need to Be Profitable. I love that. I love that, yes. Cole is a PhD student in space science from Bettendorf, Iowa. I made some puns about Bettendorf. I won't say them here, but an interesting fact about Cole is that he's been to the Arctic 3 times. Excuse me, okay? 3 times, all right. I've only been once, all right, must be nice. Please join me in welcoming Cole.
Can you think of a single person who doesn't use the internet? Probably not. Even the off-the-grid crowd is somehow all over social media. And so this might be hard to believe, but big companies like AT&T and IBM turned down involvement in the internet's creation. What might be even harder to believe is that this was a calculated decision on their end. Neither of them thought that groundwork science could be profitable. And that's because at the start, before the government lifeline, it really wasn't. The start of this story in the idea of interconnected online networks goes all the way back to the 1960s, deep in government research labs. Back then, big, ambitious research projects were top priority. To set the scene, technology had won World War II, the space race and Cold War were starting, knowledge really was power. And so there was a government worldwide race for increasingly better inventions. Now, connecting isolated, room-sized computing machines was really helpful to a national cause. And it was actually the US's Advanced Research Projects Agency that conceived the first network of these connected machines. They had the idea, but they needed contractors to build it out. As you can see, this first network pitched to AT&T and IBM wasn't designed for commercial viability, but for research. And so they looked over the proposal and they said, no, that's never gonna work. IBM declined due to cost, and AT&T declined, believing the technology would never even work on their phone lines, both believing the research would be an inefficient use of their resources. So the US government, with far more money and long-term vision, had to turn to smaller research contractors to get the network built out. And so that's what they did. Eventually, by the 1980s, it was funding from the National Science Foundation that had established an internet backbone supporting hundreds of thousands of machines and users worldwide. Eventually, when companies did flood the web, the hard work had been done. The gap between research and utility had been crossed. Today, no one owns the internet, not the US government, not any one company. Groundwork science like this is a public good. It improves our societal needs, and no one's prevented from using it. It's also something only a government could have made. While by all means the federal science system is not perfect, it's not constrained to quarterly demands, and it has more patience and resources to create groundbreaking innovations that eventually reshape everyday lives, no matter how unprofitable or inefficient businesses say they are. But it's these words, unprofitability and inefficiency, that are the cited reasons for immeasurable disruptions to federal science last year in 2025. These criticisms are the same ones from 1971. But what they miss is it's funding from government science that gets us Mars bases and cures for cancer and the next internet, whatever that looks like. Without federal science, innovations that would have been made in 25 years won't be made for 75 years or more. And so what does that mean for you? It means you lose out on the groundbreaking innovations reshaping lives. And now you have to trust the AT&Ts and IBMs of the world, ever so wise with what futures are worth investing in. But science shouldn't need to be profitable because profit demands immediate returns, and our greatest innovations were overlooked when the return wasn't immediate. So next time you're scrolling and you see the argument, government science doesn't do anything for us, challenge that assumption, check your connection, and be thankful profit didn't prevent us from the internet.
Thank you so much for that, Cole. Our next speaker is Zemo Shu, presenting her talk titled, Too Much, Still Unbroken. Zemo is a master's student in applied statistics from Chengdu, China. An interesting fact about her is that she loves music and dancing. All right, now I can cut a rug too. Some of y'all don't know that term or that phrase, but it's okay. Please join me in welcoming Zemo.
You just overthink. People have said that to me my entire life. For a long time, I believed them. I thought maybe I was really too sensitive, that my reactions were a flaw I need to fix in order to belong. My earliest memory of this goes back to when I was 5 years old. I was standing on a stage at school. I was supposed to perform like all the other kids around me, but I froze. It wasn't fear in the way people usually imagine it. It was the noise, the talking, the movement. At the time, it probably looked like refusal, or shyness, or weakness. But all I remember is discomfort, being overwhelmed by everything all at once. I didn't have a word for them, but that was my very first encounter with what I would later learn to call sensitivity. As I grew older, moments like this kept repeating. I became very aware of tones, atmospheres, and unspoken signals. Sounds, moods, and even small shifts in energy registered with me immediately. Family and friends usually responded by labeling it. You think too much, you're just too sensitive, just relax. I feel somehow misunderstood. So over time, I learned maybe my sensitivity was something I should hide. So I learned to fit in. I stayed in busy environments that drained me. I went to large social events, and afterward, it often took me a long time to recover. It wasn't until much later that I began to understand what sensitivity actually is. Sensitivity isn't rare. According to recent research, roughly 1/5 to 1/3 of the population scores high on measures of sensitivity. That means in this room today, roughly 15 of us probably have sensitive traits. And yet, people with those traits are often told explicitly or implicitly that they are too much. In psychological, high sensitivity is a personality trait characterized by high-end emotional, social, and environmental perceptions. High sensitive individuals tend to process information more deeply, especially interpersonal cues, social signals, and contextual details. This is not a disorder. So, imagine someone who is highly sensitive. We often picture a person who is super introverted or emotionally fragile or easily overwhelmed. However, sensitivity is not just about feeling more, it's also about perceiving more. For a long time, though, I didn't see it that way. I treated my sensitivity as a technical problem. I thought it could be easily adjusted, just like fixing a syntax error in a Python program. I tried so hard to force myself to be different. I kept assuming that if something felt hard, it meant I was not capable. I even read a book that I randomly found in a bookstore called The Power of Insensitivity. And it doesn't work, trust me. The real shift came later during my sophomore year of university. That summer, I lived alone for the very first time. So without constant noise or social expectations, I began to notice something more important. I was not avoiding people because I was incapable. I was avoiding environments that consumed more energy than I had. When I stopped to force myself to fit into those environments, I actually feel lighter. And looking back, I realized I didn't even like that version of me, who I was trying to be before. So that was the first time I began to see sensitivity not as a limitation, but as information. Maybe sensitivity wasn't an error at all. Maybe it doesn't need to be fixed. Maybe it is simply the way I move through this world. Once I stopped to force myself to be different, sensitivity slowly became a gift instead of a curse. It became a tool for understanding, for connection, for empathy, and for care. Standing on this stage right now, looking back at that 5-year-old kid frozen under an ice, I want to say, living a way that is genuinely who you are is not wrong. Being too much does not mean being broken. And sometimes staying unbroken means refusing to become less than who you are. Thank you.
Thank you, Zemo. Our next speaker is Nimasata Daba Danjo, presenting her talk titled My Unplanned Journey, Battle in Presence, My Sickle Cell Story. Nimasata is a PhD and Masters of Public Health student in Health Management and Policy, as well as Molecular, Cellular, and Developmental Biology. That's all? Is there anything else you want to throw in there too? No? Okay, all right. She is from the Mane Kunda Basse, the Gambia. An interesting fact about her is as a child, she was an award-winning child speaker, leader, and writer. Right on. All right, I love that. Please join me in welcoming Nimasata.
So I go to my friend's research laboratory because I am her study subject. It's an fMRI lab. And she goes, Numa, and she goes, Numa, you are pregnant. This was the list of the reason why I was there. Okay. I'm here envisioning me pushing a baby in a stroller, on a swing in a playground, or doing hide-and-seek games. Well, soon enough, the reality of becoming a mom, that severe fatigue and the voracious hunger set in. 2 months later, I was at the Michigan Medicine Women's Hospital for my first sonogram appointment. And hearing my baby's heartbeat for the first time, God, that feeling was sacred. And if you were present at a sonogram appointment with me, you may have seen the baby stretching, yawning, suckling his thumb, or just minding his business. Fast forward to February 2023, right at 12:12 noon. My ray of sunshine made his grand entrance into this world. Abdullah, we named him, is an image of all the zillion mind guesses of what he would look like. I fell in love like never before and was ready to raise this human being, right? And have fun doing that. One day, it is time for his first pediatrician visit. And I'm here thinking we're talking about his weight, his growth. But the doctor said something that would change me forever as a parent. I am sorry, but your son has sickle cell disease. Sickle cell is characterized by, sorry, I'm trying to handle a lot in my hand, by the presence of sickle-shaped red cells that may look like this, that have less oxygen carrying capacity to, the vital organs and everywhere, compared to the normal round shaped of the red cells. I got told to watch for red flags for ER visits, to make sure the baby stays hydrated, to limit outdoors at specific temperatures, to limit infectious exposures. How do you do that? And that my baby may need more cognitive stimulation to meet his milestones. For my child, Abdullah, it meant winter hibernation, limited social experiences, daily medications, pain that defies routine pain medications, and a whole lot for a small body to carry. For me, it meant all of those things and more. Living and doing this as a single mom and a dual degree graduate student. All right, let's move. Now I want you all to imagine that you got some supernatural ability to understand the language of metals in a welder shop. What would an iron that is preheated and being forged say? Maybe ouchie, like Abdullah. I am dying. Oh, please, no. Okay, but the iron turns out fine and actually turns out indispensable when it is turned into our electrodes and many tools that we use in the kitchen and other places. I realized that this moment was my own iron forging moment, and that unplanned outcomes do happen in life. And they may present opportunities for us to live and learn differently. I chose to approach this forging moment by being present in knowledge, in action, in my own sickle cell trade and my child's sickle cell disease journey. I chose the opportunities of mindful and intentional parenting, the opportunities of genuine empathy, courage, resilience, and advocacy, like right now. Such that my unplanned journey, my unplanned battle and presence leaves me unbroken and still able to raise this human being to be wholesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nimasada. Our final speaker for the evening is Etta Bozkirk, presenting her talk titled, The Ethics of Seeing, Making Knowledge Public. She is a PhD student in architecture from Ankara, Turkey. An interesting fact about Ida is she is a competitive ballroom dancer. You got it. I'll let you got it. Please join me in welcoming Ida.
right. I just want to start with a very quick question. What do you do when you lose something? Do you retrace your steps? Look under every surface, the bed, the couch? I also sometimes need to look under my dog's toy basket. Maybe you order more air tags and just hope for the best. When we lose things like that, we just assume that they're easy to recover. Or if not, we just simply replace them, right? But some losses don't work that way. I got to rethink the meaning of loss this past summer. Let me take you to Ankara, Turkey, my hometown. This is where I grew up in. I know its streets, its hills, its rhythms, or I guess I only thought I did. Until I stepped outside my little pink bubble and into the neighborhoods that are actually being demolished through urban renewal over years. I was just not doing research there. I was also confronting how partial my understanding of a familiar place had been. So one day, a woman invited me into her new apartment. She pulled out a photograph, handed it to me. It was a picture from her old house, which has already been demolished a couple of years ago. She looked me in the eye, held my hand, and said something that I will never forget. She said, "Write this down so people don't forget us." I nodded my head, but then later I felt very uneasy. Like, what does it really mean to write something down? Like, where do I write? Who am I to write? Who do I write for? And maybe most importantly, what happens to those stories that I read and move on, but people don't? Because that woman still visits her old neighborhood pretty frequently. Not because the buildings are there, obviously, because they're all torn down, but because her people are. One day she invited me, she asked me to tag along and took me to what I want to call bread making party. So it is here. This is the bread making party, which happens every Sunday at a small bake room. So if you were there with me that day, you would see the smoke and flour floating in the air. You would feel the heat coming from the hearth. You will smell the freshly baked bread. And if you were lucky, they could offer you a slice and you could have tasted it. It was very good. So women sat on the floor around the stove oven, which they made with their hands. They were talking constantly. They were talking about their husbands, their children, their everyday chores, everyday struggles. They were doing little gossip. And I was just standing there, like holding my little notebook, trying to take notes, record the moment. It was like, what am I doing there? Like, where do I even sit? I was unsure. But what they were not talking about that day, though, was how to make the bread. They didn't need to. Everyone knew. There was no hierarchy, no instructions. Everyone knew when to step in, when to step back. And I was just struggling. Anyway, so I just decided to let myself be present with them instead. And I did. And at that moment, I realized that that way of being together had absolutely no place in the plans, the urban renewal plans that made for that neighborhood, and many others. I recognize that. Those people don't forget themselves. They carry knowledge in their bodies, in their gestures, in their routines, the way they gather, they cook, they laugh, and they care for one another. Yeah. So the question was not whether they will be forgotten. The question was, who is willing to see them? And that question really shaped how I approach research. I no longer see justice as something you deliver at the end, but something that you actively practice along the way. Think about it. Seeing is never neutral. A camera, a map, a notebook, like remember the one that I was holding in the bake room, which was super irrelevant. They can all create distance. But when they're used with people, not only for them, they can be tools of visibility, care, shared authorship, shared ownership. This is why I use participatory methods in my research. I invite people to take their own pictures, tell their own stories, and decide how they want their stories to be told. And in fact, this very picture was taken by the woman who invited me there. Full disclosure, she gave me her consent to use it here, so she knows that I am actually telling her story. So before I finish, I want to do a little exercise with you. If you feel comfortable, I ask you to close your eyes and think of a place that really matters to you. It could be the house you grew up in. It could be the street where you learned how to ride a bike. Or maybe, I don't know, a schoolyard where you used to play hide and seek with your friends. Just somewhere that is really special to you. Now ask yourself, if that place disappeared tomorrow, who would remember how life once had been there? Let yourself sit with that feeling. Let it sink in. Now you can open your eyes. So that feeling, that quiet sense of loss, attachment, belonging, is what anchors my research. It is where I ask, what if justice begins with how we choose to see and who we refuse to look away from? Because when knowledge is shared with intention, it doesn't only document loss. Sometimes it becomes an act of care, and sometimes it becomes a form of justice. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Edda, for that. Let's give our speakers one more round of applause, please. That concludes our 9th annual King Talks. The 7 speakers tonight taught us so much. And I would just like to highlight some of the topics that came to my mind as they relate to our theme of Unbowed and Unbroken, the enduring struggle for justice. For Amina's speech, despite the settings and environment, midwives rise to the occasion and to the aid of women in need. Justice starts with awareness, and Amina is shedding a light on the work of midwives. Anjali reminded us that we can treat ourselves unjustly so that we need to consciously align our thoughts, words, and actions. When you do that, you can go anywhere. Kende reminded us that, or even informed us and taught us, Afro-German women use their use of German in the demand of their being and belonging in Germany sets a powerful example for the world to see. Language is a powerful tool that is strategically wielded to demand our humanity. Cole shared that scientific advancements for public good should not be limited by capitalistic ideas of profitability. Human well-being is often stifled due to the lack of prioritization of the human and more broadly, the earth. Zemo shared that sensitivity is a lens to view the world and not a weakness. Thinking about others and considering others is a strength. Nimasada shared with us that unexpected events can be forges where we are transformed into resilient advocates that are stronger than our previous forms. With this realization, we are able to stand for others that are facing similar challenges. And last but not least, Etta shared that the roots of the community cannot and must not be removed nor forgotten. Research is not only in the numbers, it is in the stories of those that are marginalized, the unseen, or the unknown. Many thanks to all of you for coming out tonight here in person or those tuning in virtually at home to hear our graduate student speakers share their stories and visions for the future. Recordings of all the talks you heard tonight will be available soon. But in the meantime, you can watch previous year's King Talks on the Rackham website, and the link will also be emailed to all registrants. So if you want to go watch mine, you can do that. No pressure, I'm not counting the views or anything, so it's okay. For those of you here with us in the Assembly Hall, we invite you to the alcoves on either side of the room for refreshments and the opportunity to interact with the speakers and their loved ones. Finally, I would like to close in which the manner we opened. Please repeat after me. Hotep, 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 Hotep. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening, and let's give our speakers one last round of applause.